Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she explores the beautiful American city of Savannah, Georgia. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. The morning air in Savannah carried a softness that Lyla had been hoping for. October here was gentle, the heat of summer finally loosening its grip, leaving behind something mild and breathable. She had arrived the evening before, checked into a small inn near the historic district, and fallen asleep to the distant sound of church bells and the rustle of live oak leaves outside her window. Now, walking toward Forsyth Park, she felt the city beginning to stir around her. The sidewalks were uneven in places, the old bricks worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Spanish moss hung from the trees in long, silvery drapes, swaying slightly in the breeze. It gave the streets a timeless quality, as though she had stepped into a photograph from another era. Forsyth Park stretched out before her, a wide expanse of green framed by those ancient oaks. She could see joggers in the distance, a few people walking dogs, and someone sitting on a bench with a book. The park felt spacious, but not empty, alive in a quiet, unhurried way. The grass was still slightly damp from the morning dew, and as Lyla walked along the path, she noticed how the sunlight filtered through the canopy of leaves above, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. A squirrel darted across the path ahead of her, pausing briefly to assess her before scampering up the trunk of a nearby oak. Lyla made her way toward the fountain at the center of the park. She had seen pictures of it before. Everyone had, but seeing it in person was different. The fountain rose up in tiers, white and elegant, water spilling from one level to the next in a continuous, soothing rhythm. The sound of it was lovely, a gentle splashing that seemed to blend with the rustling leaves and the distant chatter of morning voices. She stood there for a while, watching the water catch the light. The fountain was surrounded by benches, and a few early visitors had already claimed spots. A couple sharing a thermos of coffee, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a young woman with headphones doing gentle stretches. A woman walked past with a golden retriever, the dog's tail wagging in broad, happy arcs. Lyla smiled. There was something deeply peaceful about being in a place with no particular agenda, no schedule pressing in on her. She was here simply to see, to wander, to let the day unfold. She circled the fountain slowly, taking in the details she hadn't noticed from a distance. The ornate decorations at each level, the way the water moved differently depending on which tier it fell from, the green patina on some of the metal fittings that spoke to the fountain's age. Birds came and went from the upper basin, taking quick baths before flying off to the trees. After a few more minutes, she turned and began walking south through the park, back toward the historic district. The streets here were laid out in a grid, punctuated by squares. Small parks, really, each one with its own character. She had read that Savannah had more than 20 of them, and she was curious to see how they felt, one by one. Her first stop was Monterey Square. It was smaller than Forsyth Park, more intimate, with neatly trimmed hedges and a monument at its center. The square was bordered by tall townhouses, their facades painted in muted colors: cream, pale yellow, soft green. The architecture was elegant, restrained, with high windows and iron railings. She liked the way the building seemed to lean slightly inward, as though watching over the square. On the southern edge of the square stood the Mercer Williams house. Lyla paused to look at it. The house was stately, with red brick and white trim tall windows catching the morning light. She knew it had some history, some fame, but she wasn't concerned with the details. She simply appreciated the way it sat there, dignified and calm, part of the fabric of the neighborhood. She continued walking, heading north. The streets were quiet, the occasional car passing slowly, respectfully. She passed Congregation Mikhav Israel, a striking building with Gothic arches and a sense of solemnity. A small plaque by the entrance mentioned its long history, one of the oldest Jewish congregations in the country. Lyla lingered for a moment, taking in the details of the stonework, the careful craftsmanship. Madison Square was next, another small green space with towering trees. In the center stood a statue, a soldier on a pedestal, surrounded by cannons. Lyla walked around it slowly, reading the inscriptions. The square felt peaceful despite the military history it commemorated. A man sat on a bench nearby, sketching in a notebook. She caught a glimpse of his drawing, loose, confident lines capturing the shape of the trees. Across from the square was the Green Meldrum House, another grand structure with wide verandas and intricate ironwork. Lyla admired it from the sidewalk, noticing the way the light filtered through the trees and fell across the front steps. Everything here seemed designed for shade, for sitting, for slowing down. She walked on, reaching Chippewa Square. This one felt more open, with benches arranged in neat rows and a statue at its center. She recognized the square from a movie she had seen years ago, though she couldn't quite remember which one. It didn't matter. The square had its own presence, its own quiet dignity. The Savannah Theater stood on the edge of the square, its marquee announcing upcoming shows. The building had a classic look, with columns and ornate detailing. Lyla imagined the generations of people who had passed through its doors, the plays and performances that had filled its stage. There was something comforting about that continuity, the way the city held on to its past without being weighed down by it. By now the morning was warming, the sun climbing higher. Lyla felt a pleasant tiredness in her legs, the kind that comes from steady, unhurried walking. She decided it was time to find some lunch. City Market was a short walk away, a lively area filled with shops, galleries, and restaurants. The streets here were pedestrian-friendly, with brick pathways and open courtyards. Lyla wandered through, taking in the sights. There were art studios displaying bright paintings, small boutiques selling jewelry and clothing, a candy shop with jars of old-fashioned sweets in the window. She found a cafe with outdoor seating, tucked into a corner of the market. The tables were shaded by umbrellas, and a chalkboard menu listed sandwiches, salads, and daily specials. Lyla ordered a shrimp salad sandwich and a glass of iced tea, then settled into a chair to wait. The cafe was busy, but not loud. Nearby, a couple debated which gallery to visit next. At another table, a woman typed away on a laptop, her coffee cup nearly empty. Lyla watched the flow of people through the market. Tourists with cameras, locals with shopping bags, a group of college students laughing over something on a phone. Her sandwich arrived, the shrimp fresh and lightly seasoned, tucked into a soft roll with lettuce and a touch of lemon aioli. She ate slowly, savoring the flavors, the coolness of the tea, the pleasant hum of activity around her. As she finished, an older gentleman at the next table caught her eye. He was wearing a seersucker suit despite the casual setting and had a kind, weathered face. "First time in Savannah?" he asked, his accent soft and distinctly Southern. "It is," Lyla said, smiling. "I've been wandering all morning. It's a beautiful city." "It surely is," he said, nodding. "Been here my whole life, and I still find new things to appreciate. You been down to the river yet?" "That's my next stop, actually." "Well, you take your time down there. River Street can get a bit touristy, but if you walk far enough in either direction, you'll find some quiet spots. And the sunset from down there? Just lovely." "I'll do that. Thank you." "Enjoy your visit now," he said warmly, tipping an imaginary hat before returning to his newspaper. Lyla felt warmed by the brief exchange, the easy friendliness of it. After lunch, she made her way toward the riverfront. The walk took her through Johnson Square, one of the oldest in the city. A large monument stood at its center, and the square was framed by buildings with tall columns and wide storefronts. She passed a bank, a coffee shop, a small bookstore with a display of local authors in the window. Ellis Square was next, a more modern space with a fountain and open plaza. Children ran through the water jets, their laughter bright and carefree. Parents sat on benches nearby, watching with relaxed smiles. Lyla paused to watch, enjoying the simple joy of it. From there, she descended toward the riverfront along Factor's Walk, a steep, cobbled pathway lined with old buildings. The structures here had a utilitarian feel, built for commerce rather than grandeur, but they had aged beautifully. The brick was dark with time, the ironwork sturdy and plain. She could imagine the workers who once moved goods up and down this path, the carts and horses, the busy hum of trade. At the bottom of the slope, she reached River Street. The Savannah River stretched out before her, wide and slow-moving. The opposite bank was lined with trees, a green blur in the distance. To her left and right, River Street curved along the waterfront, lined with shops, restaurants, and bars. The cobblestones here were uneven, worn smooth in places, and Lyla walked carefully, taking her time. The street had a lively energy, but it was still early enough in the afternoon that it didn't feel overwhelming. Music drifted from an open doorway, someone playing guitar, the melody bluesy and relaxed. The smell of pralines wafted from a candy shop, sweet and buttery. A vendor had set up a small table with handmade jewelry, the pieces glinting in the sunlight. She browsed a few of the shops, one selling handmade soaps, another filled with nautical decor. In a small gallery, she admired watercolor paintings of the marshlands and rivers, the colors soft and luminous. She didn't buy anything, but she enjoyed the looking, the quiet pleasure of being surrounded by beautiful things. Inside the gallery, a woman with silver hair and bright paint-stained hands was arranging a new display. "Those marsh paintings are incredible," Lyla said. "The light in them is just perfect." The woman looked up with a pleased smile. "Thank you so much. I paint them early in the morning. That's when the light does that golden thing across the water. Are you visiting?" "I am. Just for a few days." "Well, you picked a lovely time. October here is just about perfect. Not too hot, not too crowded. You staying in the historic district? Yes, near one of the squares. Oh, you're right in the heart of it then. Make sure you walk through Colonial Park Cemetery if you get a chance. It's peaceful, and the light through those trees is something special. I was planning to go this afternoon, actually. Perfect. Enjoy it. And Savannah. Thank you, Lyla said warmly. She stepped back outside, feeling again that sense of welcome, of being gently included in the rhythm of the city. She continued along River Street, pausing now and then to watch the river. A cargo ship moved slowly upstream, its hull riding low in the water. She wondered where it was going, what it was carrying, all the ports it had visited. The river had its own life, its own stories, separate from the city but deeply connected to it. She found a bench near the water and sat down. A riverboat was docked nearby, white and stately, its paddle wheel gleaming in the afternoon sun. A few tourists boarded for a tour, and Lyla watched as the boat slowly pulled away, its horn giving a low, melodic call. The river moved past, patient and steady. A seagull swooped low, skimming the surface before rising again. Lyla closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the water, the distant voices, the occasional clang of a buoy or boat. After a while, she stood and began making her way back up toward the historic district. The afternoon was slipping into late afternoon, the light taking on a warmer golden quality. She walked to Telfair Square, another of Savannah's green spaces. This one felt particularly elegant, with well-kept gardens and stately buildings on all sides. The Telfair museums were here. 2 of them, she had read. The Jepson Center was modern, all clean lines and glass, while the Owens Thomas House was older, more traditional. Lyla admired them both from the outside, appreciating the contrast, the way old and new could sit side by side, with mutual respect. Wright Square was nearby, and she strolled through it slowly. The square was quieter now, the afternoon heat keeping most people indoors. A woman sat on a bench, knitting, her needles clicking in a steady rhythm. Lyla smiled at her as she passed, and the woman nodded back, a small, friendly gesture. She continued on to the Cathedral Basilica of St. John the Baptist. The building rose up dramatically, its twin spires reaching toward the sky. The stonework was intricate, the windows tall and arched. Lyla stood at the entrance, looking up, feeling small in the best way. She stepped inside for a moment, and the cool, dim interior enveloped her. The light filtered through stained glass, casting soft colors across the pews. Everything was hushed, reverent. She didn't stay long, just long enough to feel the weight of the silence, the beauty of the space. Outside again, she walked toward Colonial Park Cemetery. The entrance was marked by an iron gate, and the cemetery itself was surprisingly peaceful. Old gravestones leaned at various angles, some worn smooth by time, others still legible. The trees here were dense, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Lyla walked the pathways slowly, reading the names and dates, imagining the lives that had passed through this city. Some of the stones were elaborate, with carved angels or decorative borders. Others were simple, just a name and 2 dates marking a life's beginning and end. She noticed how many were from the 1700s and 1800s. some from the yellow fever epidemics that had swept through the South. The inscriptions were touching in their directness. Beloved wife, devoted father, gone too soon. The cemetery felt less like a place of mourning and more like a garden of memory. Ivy grew over some of the walls, and wildflowers had taken root in the spaces between stones. A butterfly landed on one of the older monuments, its wings opening and closing slowly in the filtered sunlight. There was no sadness here, just a gentle acknowledgement of time, of continuity. She found a bench near the center and sat for a while, listening to the birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of traffic beyond the walls. The artist from the gallery had been right. The light here was special, soft and dappled, moving as the branches swayed overhead. Eventually she made her way to Lafayette Square. This square felt particularly gracious, with a fountain at its center and homes that seemed especially grand. The Andrew Lowe House stood on the square's edge, a beautiful townhouse with a wide porch and tall windows. Lyla admired it from across the street, noting the careful symmetry, the sense of proportion. The day was softening now, the sun beginning its slow descent. Lyla felt pleasantly tired, her legs heavy in a satisfying way. She had walked for hours, seen so much, and yet she felt she had only scratched the surface of this city. She decided to wander back toward River Street for the evening. As she walked, she noticed signs advertising ghost tours, groups gathering in the squares, guides in period costume holding lanterns. She paused near one group, listening for a moment as the guide began to tell a story about the city's history, its hauntings, its legends. The listeners stood in a loose circle, their faces lit by the glow of the lanterns, their expressions a mix of curiosity and amusement. Lyla smiled to herself and continued on. She wasn't in the mood for ghosts, not tonight. She wanted something quieter, something gentler. She made her way back to the riverfront as the sun touched the horizon. The sky was turning, shifting from blue to soft pink and orange. The river reflected the colors, shimmering and shifting with the current. She found a spot near the water, leaning against a railing, and watched the sunset unfold. The light changed slowly, almost imperceptibly, deepening and warming, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The buildings along River Street glowed in the golden light, their brick facades warm and inviting. A pelican flew past, low over the water, its wings barely moving as it glided along. Lyla watched it disappear around the bend of the river. The air was cooling now, a gentle breeze coming off the water, carrying with it the smell of the river, slightly marshy, slightly salt-tinged, holy itself. Other people gathered along the riverfront, drawn by the same quiet spectacle. No one spoke much. They simply watched, together but separate, sharing the moment. A couple stood hand in hand nearby. A man with a camera carefully adjusted his tripod, trying to capture the light. A woman leaned against the railing a few feet from Lyla, a small smile on her face. The riverboat returned, its paddle wheel turning slowly, its lights beginning to glow as the daylight faded. The sound of a jazz band drifted from one of the nearby restaurants, the music low and mellow, blending with the evening air. Someone laughed, a warm sound that carried across the water. Lyla stayed until the sun had fully set, until the sky had turned from orange to deep purple. The streetlights along River Street flickered on, casting warm pools of light across the cobblestones. The city was settling into its evening rhythm, a different kind of energy now, relaxed, convivial, unhurried. She began walking back toward her inn, taking her time, following the quiet streets. The air had cooled, just enough to be pleasant. Lights glowed in the windows of the townhouses she passed, and she could hear the faint sound of conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses. She found herself back at one of the smaller squares, the one near her inn. A bench sat empty beneath one of the live oaks, and she settled onto it, content to spend a bit more time outside. The evening air moved gently around her, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby. The live oaks were silhouettes now, their branches arching overhead like a cathedral. She could hear the distant sound of the river, a low, constant murmur. Lyla thought about the day, the gentle rhythm of it, the way the city had revealed itself to her slowly, generously. She thought about the squares, each one a small pocket of calm, a place to pause. She thought about the river, the way it moved past without hurry, carrying boats and light and time. She felt content, deeply so. There was something restorative about this kind of wandering, this kind of seeing. No rush, no pressure, just the simple pleasure of being in a place, of letting it settle into her. Tomorrow she would explore more. There were other squares to see, other streets to walk, other corners of the city to discover. But for now she was here, in this moment, in this quiet room with the memory of the day still warm around her. She stood and closed the curtains, then moved to the bed. The sheets were cool and soft, and as she settled in, she felt the pleasant weight of tiredness in her body. Outside, the city continued its evening, the soft hum of life carrying on. Lyla closed her eyes, letting the sounds of Savannah drift around her, the rustling of the oaks, the distant murmur of voices, the steady, comforting presence of the river beyond. She thought of the fountain in Forsyth Park, the water spilling endlessly from tier to tier. She thought of the cobblestones on River Street, worn smooth by countless footsteps. She thought of the light filtering through the stained glass in the cathedral, casting patterns of color across the floor. All of it settled into her, becoming part of her, a collection of moments and impressions that she would carry with her. The night deepened. The city grew quieter, and Lyla rested, held by the gentle, enduring presence of Savannah, a city that knew how to take its time, how to honor its past while moving forward, how to offer a visitor exactly what she needed, a place to slow down and simply feel at peace.